trial, trial,
telling me that I am live. So one thing that you can do is you can test your audio sync right here on this,
trial,
or you can also test your audio sync by actually opening up your channel page and going to the specific URL of your stream, which would be whatever your channel is /live. Then once your stream is over, all you have to do is go back into OBS and you hit stop streaming. And then from there, YouTube will close everything else down. And then you are taken care of and your first stream is complete.
trial,
climb out of his suit.
trial.
Looks like he is out of Crew Dragon now, and Doug Hurley following suit. No pun intended. There we see Bob in the foreground and Doug climbing out of Crew Dragon in the background. Pad closeout team. Looks like helping them out. So any minute they're going to be basically just reversing course, coming back the way they came. Leland, I know you had a scrub years back. Basically just
Marie, in 2008.
Trial.
Having breakfast. I never scrubbed while I was in the vehicle, but we were
Trial.
having breakfast, and we got a call from the flight director.
Trial.
Having breakfast. I never
Trial.
scrubbed while I was in the vehicle, but we were
Trial.
having breakfast, and we got a call from the flight director.
Trial. 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 trial, 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 trial,
32 minutes.
Stage 1 locks and
Falcon 9
RP1
did
flow rates are
begin
nominal.
propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes, right on time. The propellants we use on Falcon 9 are a fuel, which is rocket-grade kerosene,
Trial.
also called RP1, refined petroleum. We use an oxidizer, and that's the super chilled liquid oxygen, or LOX as we call it. Those two propellants come together, but they don't light, so we need an ignition
Trial.
source to complete the fire triangle. For this, Falcon 9 uses a fluid called T-tub. You might see that just before first stage ignition, or maybe later in the second stage ignition. You get a green-colored flame as the T-tub
Trial.
comes out into the oxygen, and that ignites the main engines right before the rocket takes off or the second stage engine lights. Now, currently in
Trial.
refueling, RP1 fuel is about 10% full on the first stage. That's the bottom 2/3 of the stack of the vehicle you can see on the left. The
Trial.
first stage is that long white cylinder at the bottom, plus that black cylinder called the inner stage. That's the entire first stage that we're loading with LOX and RP1 kerosene.
Trial.
That's the part that comes back to Earth. The second stage just above it, the white cylinder, and then above that will be the Dragon trunk and the capsule. Now, currently, the second stage is also
Trial.
loading fuel with RP1. That's about 8% full right now. We are loading liquid oxygen on the
Trial.
first stage. The second stage liquid oxygen load will begin at T-minus 16.5 minutes if the weather cooperates. So LOX loading will then continue on both the first and second stage until the last few minutes of the countdown. Helium loading is also underway into pressure vessels on the second stage. We use that to pressurize the tanks in flight as the propellant is being pulled out by the Merlin turbopumps. Dragon on board the spacecraft. You can see the astronauts are monitoring systems while propellant is loaded into the Falcon 9. Now, when we flew the first demo flight last year and then the in-flight escape test earlier this year, the sounds inside the Dragon capsule were recorded. So as part of the training, the sounds of the propellant loading were played back to acclimate the crew to what they're experiencing now. I'm listening to some discussion on one of the back nets, trying to track where we are with the weather criteria. We're just passing another weather gate right now, trying to see whether or not the conditions are go. In certain situations, when the weather is no-go, you have to wait 30 minutes, and we are now inside of 30 minutes. But if the cloud moves away, if the conditions improve, we may be able to continue the countdown for another 14 minutes and reassess. So we're waiting to see whether or not we can continue the count. Currently we are. The range, they're ready to support with no problems in the air and the sea space area. But again, the weather, that's the one that's looking bad, and we're going to continue to listen. And as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch time. So at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we're going to have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity on May 30th.
For Demo 2, Bob and Doug's flight to station will take about 19 hours, and their journey is fairly similar to the trip our cargo Dragon makes back and forth to the International Space Station, with two noticeable differences, docking and splashdown.
As we await T-minus 0 in just a little over 28 minutes from now, ground operations teams just doing those final series of system checks, making sure both Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready for liftoff, and really keeping an eye on that weather. You're just continuing to get live views of the teams. You've got Falcon 9 and Dragon on your left, and then Bob and Doug on the right as they prepare at the Cape for liftoff.
Once we hit T0 and a successful launch occurs, we will watch Falcon 9 and Dragon make their ascent until Falcon 9 and first and second stages separate and send Dragon on its way to the space station.
And once it gets on orbit, mission operators will prepare Dragon for on-orbit operations, where Dragon will execute a series of burns that are going to gradually raise its orbit to align more closely with the International Space Station. And you're seeing some of that track in the animation on your screen right now. After doing enough of those burns, they'll put Dragon... Oh, sounds like we're going to get a weather update real quick for the crew.
Go ahead, SpaceX.
Yeah, we're currently just evaluating a constraint on the field mill rule, which looks at lightning energy dissipation. We expect to have an update at about T-minus 20, and more information there on whether we would be able to continue into the prop load or scrub at that time.
Okay, Jay, thanks for the update. We appreciate it.
Copy. So I'll give you some more words in about 6 minutes.
Okay, so it sounds like we're going to find out in about 6 minutes if we're going to have enough time. And John, I was referring to a couple of those weather situations where we have to have a certain amount of time. In this case, with the field mills, about 15 minutes. So they have until about 16 minutes and 30 seconds to really make sure that we're going to have enough time for that to dissipate. So we're going to be listening for that weather update in just a couple of minutes, but it is going to be a pretty interesting trip uphill for them once they actually get on orbit.
And a very exciting countdown with 6 minutes to figure out if we are launching today. But talking back to what we were talking about, next, Dragon will make its approach and actually dock with the space station. This is a very different process from what we've seen with Dragon cargo deliveries in the past, which used a process called berthing. Now, berthing requires a spacecraft to approach the station and then stop so a crew member can maneuver the station's robotic arm to capture the spacecraft. Docking on this version of Dragon can be done autonomously.
Stage 2 cryo-helium load started.
Trial.
autonomously with no crew aboard the station. It's typically a faster process, both when arriving and leaving, but it does still require pinpoint accuracy to approach safely.
Once captured, a spacecraft then gets attached to a common berthing mechanism.
Trial.
It's the same type of port that we use to connect each of the modules together on board station. It's a little bit slower process than docking, but the hatches are significantly larger than docking ports, which makes them perfect for bringing up large cargo items.
Trial.
Dragon will spend up to 120 days docked before preparing to return home. Following successful completion of Dragon's test objectives
Trial.
and cargo loading operations, the crew will close out the cabin, perform final system checks, and configure the vehicle for undocking. Once the automated undocking sequence is complete, Dragon will complete 2 departure
Trial.
burns using its Draco engines, pushing it away from the space station.
And then after Dragon departs the station, it's ready for its trip home. And that'll have deorbit entry and landing and a number of other operations. If you're looking at this animation, it might look like we're playing the one we played originally in reverse, because that's kind of how it goes, but just a little bit quicker. All of the operations following the final departure maneuver include things like trunk separation, closing that nose cone again, executing a deorbit burn, and once they're inside the atmosphere, deploying drogue and then main parachutes, and then finally splashing down off the Florida coast, at which teams will move in, get Bob and Doug up out of the water, and get them out of the capsule once they're on the boat. So we have 4 minutes now until we get that next expected weather update. Let's go down now to the team at Kennedy. Murray?
All right, thanks, Dan. If you're just joining us, we are now T-minus 23 minutes and 48 seconds from the first launch of astronauts to the International Space Station from U.S. soil in 9 years. We're going to find out in less than 4 minutes if the weather looks good for that. And this will mark the beginning of a new era where more people will be able to fly to space than ever before. In fact, we took a poll a little bit earlier to ask you if you had the opportunity to fly to space, would you go? And 86% of those of you watching answered that you would go to space.
Incredible number. I think, realizing that you don't have to be a military astronaut or a NASA astronaut to fly in space. You can be a regular just a regular person going off to space on a SpaceX type rocket. So I think that's why the numbers are so high.
Yeah, and we are really thrilled to see all the folks watching along online. I know we certainly hope that this is a go, but we're going to hear a little bit of a weather update in less than 3 minutes now. And Leland, I know they're waiting for a weather update, and they've come, almost all the way down the count. What do you think Bob and Doug are thinking about right now?
We on SES 129, we were having some weather problems, and I think we were getting close to the countdown, and then it seemed like the sky just cleared up right above our heads. We saw it, and we knew where we were going. And we always know that you can have any types of delays, fuel prop delays, all kinds of things that happen. But we've trained over and over and over again for these types of scenarios, and so we want to be safe. We want to be safe for our families, and we'll do this another day if it doesn't work with the weather.
I love that John I always says weather. It's that thing that everybody talks about, but no one can do anything about it.
I know.
And it is this interesting thing of just, succumbing to Mother Earth. She's going to tell us if we can go or not today.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if it happens, look at it this way. Bob and Doug got one really great rehearsal in, right?
It's always best to practice and practice and practice, yes.
So again, we're less than 2 minutes now from that weather update that is going to go directly to Bob and Doug, and we will quiet down so we can listen in for that, because I know we can't wait to find out what that is. And those of you watching that have been following along, we are eagerly awaiting to hear whether the weather is going to be a showstopper today.
These clouds can seem really deceiving at times, right? You see the blue skies peeking through and you think everything's fine, but you just don't know. That's why we have those launch weather officers.
Absolutely. And I know, we've talked about it before, but it's not just the weather in Florida that they're looking at. They've got to look at weather downrange. If they were to have an alert in flight and they needed to come down somewhere in the ocean, they need to consider what the weather's like out there, because recovery teams have to go out and get them in a situation like that. So there's so many variables. That's why not just with this flight, but with every human space flight we've had in the past, there's
trial, 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 trial,
Can't do that, Mike. 1645 local. I think we'll probably be clear on all the rules, but not quite going to make it for this.
Okay. We're going to check back in with you in about 2 minutes, and then I'll call it up at about T-minus 17 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, there's some of them are starting to count down, but we still have one above 2,000. So if that gets below,
and that didn't sound great right there. That was the weather net going out, but we're still standing by for a final decision. And we're going to continue to listen in for an update. But in the meantime, we're going to go over to John Innsbrucker at SpaceX headquarters in California. John?
And Dragon SpaceX on weather. We're still
T-minus 18 minutes and counting.
LD is
we are still red on weather.
Expect an update from LD.
We're waiting in about another minute for one final check with weather. We're going to check at T-minus 17 minutes possibly. We don't really expect that things will have improved. The weather officer was not optimistic that the weather would clear up that rapidly. We did hear the launch director, Mike Taylor, joke that, if we could move 10 more minutes past the T0, weather conditions may improve, but Mike was not able to do that. We have an instantaneous window today. So at 17 minutes, we want to make that call because shortly after that, we will begin loading liquid oxygen onto the second stage. So if we're not going to have the opportunity to launch, if the clock's going to run out, stand by.
We continue to violate a couple different weather rules that we now do not expect to clear in time to allow for a launch today. We go ahead and end today's launch attempt. Launch control would end the launch auto sequence and proceed into the launch abort auto sequence, please. Launch abort has started.
And Dragon SpaceX, unfortunately, we are not going to launch today. You are go for 5.100 launch scrub.
5.100. It was a good effort by the teams, and we understand, and we'll meet you there.
Copy all.
We've heard the call from the crew. They have been informed. Launch director Mike Taylor has called a scrub for the day, and we got the feedback when the Dragon team informed Bob and Doug. They said we gave it a good try, but they understand, and we are here to try another day. So right now we did officially hold the clock. It looks like at T-minus 16 minutes, 54 seconds. The launch automatic sequence that controls the Falcon 9, the loading of propellants, the cycling of valves, that is also stopped. We now proceed into what is a normal scrub sequence for us. We practice this every launch. So now we move into safely taking the propellants, the pressurization gases back off the first and second stages. as things get into a safe configuration, then we will disarm the escape system on Dragon, and we'll bring the crew access arm back around the spacecraft. So right now, we got down to just inside 17 minutes. The hardware was working very well on both Dragon and spacecraft. We had the fuel loading going on. We had liquid oxygen loading going on, everything but second stage. And the weather just needed a little bit more time to clear the conditions. We didn't have that time because we had an instantaneous window. And so with that, SpaceX launch director had to call upon the input from weather,
Dragon, copies
had to
all about
call
30
a
minutes.
scrub
Thank
for
you,
the
Mike.
day per the safety rules that we have for this flight. So right now the team is undergoing the post-scrub operations on both Dragon as well as Falcon 9, working with the range. No issues being reported right now as we start to go through that sequence. Everything looks good. And Dan, we had a good webcast going here until the very end. So, you know, we'll look at it as now we've had another great dry rehearsal. Last Saturday we did a dry one, I should say, and today we've done a wet dress rehearsal. But sorry, we just couldn't get there, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, John I. And obviously we can't control the weather. We came right down to the wire there, hoping we could just squeeze in between those cloud systems to get a launch today, but it wasn't to be. But it doesn't mean we're done. We're going to have another attempt coming up in just 3 days. So we're going to be doing this all over again, essentially, on Saturday, on the 30th. And that launch attempt is going to be coming at 3:22 p.m. Eastern time. So a little bit earlier in the day. It's going to look largely the same to everything that we saw today, with the crew waking up, going through suit up, making their way to the pad. So we're going to feel a lot of deja vu, I think, on Saturday.
Yep. But still exciting. Safety is always first. So if weather was not there for us today, hopefully Saturday it will be there for us, and we will have a safe launch on Saturday.
Yeah, the initial weather report still had us at about, I think, a 40% possibility of violation. So weather a little bit better, but we're still going to be kind of rolling the dice. It is Florida in the spring and summer, so storms are always a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
One of the good things, though, the vehicle appeared to be in great health throughout the day, both Dragon and Falcon 9, so we didn't have to scrub for any technical issue. We're going to continue and follow along with Bob and Doug until they're out of that capsule, as, again, they had started loading fuel onto the Falcon 9 rocket, so they'll have to wait until all that fuel comes off. They'll disarm the launch escape system, which still stays armed because they're still sitting on a partially loaded rocket, and then once they're able to disarm that launch escape system, the crew arm will swing back out. They'll make their way once again back the way they came, and then it'll be back to crew quarters for Bob and Doug for a few more days. But if you're just now tuning in, wondering why we're not still counting down, we did have a launch scrub today. We were just a little under 17 minutes.
Stage 1 LOX and fuel flow rates are nominal for offload. Expecting about a 40-minute offload time.
And so that call out the LOX, the liquid oxygen fuel pumping out of the first stage of the Falcon 9, everything looking good with that. Expecting about 40 minutes for all that fuel to come off. So again, once that fuel comes off, Bob and Doug will be able to disarm the launch escape system, and that crew access arm will swing back out. They'll be able to make their way back down and then over to crew quarters. So unfortunate scrub today because of weather. That was the one thing we were tracking from the moment we started today, watching Bob and Doug get suited up for their launch. We did abort today's launch, or scrub today's launch, with a little under 17 minutes to go until our T0 time, which was 4:33. So that's going to move us to our next attempt, which is coming up on Saturday, and that time is going to be 3:22 p.m. Eastern time, so a little bit earlier in the day for Bob and Doug and for everybody else watching around the world. They're still going to have a 19-hour flight to station if that's when we launch, and a lot of the stuff that we saw today is going to look very similar, but we're just going to have to try again, cross our fingers, hope for a little bit better weather the next time.
And again, this goes with every launch. We do track everything all the way down to T0 to make sure that everything is go, making sure that the range is go. weather is go. So this is standard procedure. We always tend to make sure that we have a backup day, launch day, in case we do have scrubs like today. So this is pretty normal and standard. Nothing to be worried about. Again, we do this for the safety of our vehicles, as well as today we had astronauts on our vehicle. So even bigger reason for us to make sure that we have safe weather for them to fly.
And just a reminder for everyone still tuned in, it takes about 40 minutes for all of this propellant to come off of the Falcon 9. And while it is offloading that launch escape system on Dragon, which is designed to pull the capsule away if there's any issue with the rocket or anything on the pad, that is still armed. So we're going to continue to stay with this until all the propellant's off, and then we'll see the launch escape system get disarmed. Bob and Doug will be able to open up their visors again. The crew access arm will swing back out and link up with Dragon, and they'll make their way off and then down the tower at the pad. But if you're just now tuning in, no launch today. We did have to scrub because of weather. We're going to be moving to our second attempt on Saturday, just a little bit earlier in the afternoon. Just going to continue to stand by as this propellant comes off. We heard a call that everything was going nominally or as expected so far. And then once all the propellant's off, we should see Bob and Doug make their way out of Dragon shortly after.
And what you're seeing on your screen is a live view of Bob and Doug on the right side inside of Dragon as they're waiting for propellant to be removed from the vehicle so that it is safe for them to disarm the launch escape system. And this will take a bit of time, so we are going to stay live with you to watch this as they exit the vehicle eventually and come down from standing down on launch today.
Up until the point of the scrub, we had a really clean countdown, weren't tracking any issues with Falcon 9 or the Dragon spacecraft, so always a good thing to see. We did have to scrub because of that weather. To be a little bit more specific, we were still in violation of one of the weather criterias. It was the strength of electric fields in the atmosphere that the 45th Space Wing and other weather operators are monitoring around the launch pad. And that's one of those rules where we need a certain amount of time if we're in a violation. In this case,
nominal, roughly 50% on stage 1 locks in, fuel 85% on stage 2 fuel.
So the propellant offload on Falcon 9 continuing to go well. But we needed a little bit more time if we were going to be able to clear that launch weather constraint. And since we do have an instantaneous launch window today, we weren't able to make it. So we hope for better weather coming up on Saturday, where again our next launch attempt is going to be at 3:22 p.m. Eastern time, and we'll be able to go through everything. I mean, we saw them get suited up. They had a great ride out to the pad. All of their initial checks on both the suits with pressure checks and communication checks went well. Able to get the Dragon hatch closed, the launch escape system arm, and Falcon 9 started its fueling. Just not able to make a good weather window today.
And as John I said earlier, it was just another great rehearsal today. I don't think you can get enough practice doing this. So when Saturday comes, or when the day that we can actually launch the vehicle, Bob and Doug and the NASA and SpaceX team are fully prepared with just an extra rehearsal on the belt now.
Yeah, as we had talked a couple of times throughout our countdown, the weather is a lot more complex when we're launching humans. You have some more stringent requirements in place, not only around the pad, but in the case of this launch today, we were also looking at whether the entire ascent corridor, as we call it, so basically the entire way that they were flying up the east coast of the United States in this launch today, we're monitoring that weather because those are areas that if they have an ascent abort, or basically Dragon firing off of the Falcon 9 while they're flying into space, we have to make sure that conditions are good in the sea states around those areas, just so they're not going to be landing in the middle of a hurricane, which we did have a tropical storm forming right off the coast of South Carolina today, just to help complicate things a little bit.
And people might be asking, if we knew the weather was going to be a little iffy today, why continue to count down? Well, that is the reason why we do all these checks all the way to countdown. In Florida, the weather is, pretty sporadic. Sometimes a thunderstorm or hurricane will pass through. Within 20 minutes, it's gone, and we could have clear skies for a safe launch. So we continued as scheduled. Standard procedure again to just continue to monitor weather all the way down to the last minutes of the count, and we see what happens. So today, unfortunately, we did scrub for weather, but we will attempt again this Saturday on May 30th.
And Dan, Jesse, a couple of things to add on there. Right now we are 11 minutes after the scrub was called. Liquid oxygen and fuel are coming off of the first stage. Hard to tell from the view. It's still a little misty around the tank because there's locks on board. But we're between half and a third of each of the fuel and LOX tanks filled on the first stage. So propellant coming out right per plan. The second stage fuel tank is offloading. That's going slower, but it's also a smaller tank. It doesn't take very long to either load it or to offload it. The other thing that we're working on is the high-pressure helium spheres, as well as the nitrogen spheres for the landing leg system. The pressure will be brought down on those, eventually getting it down low enough to where people can re-enter the pad area. So right now, the team is preparing, once they get a permission, the SpaceX ingress-egress technician team will come back inside the caution area around the pad, make their way up when conditions are right, open up the hatch, and assist the astronauts out of the Dragon. I'd like to point out that for those who are wondering whether or not, having gone through this, putting propellant, pressurization gases on, getting fairly close to launch, whether that has done anything to wear out the Falcon 9 or the Dragon, the answer is no. If you can recall, the Falcon 9's designed for at least 10 flights, and about time we get up to a 10th flight, we'll be doing testing to find that we probably got enough margin to keep flying. So this is the very first flight of a new first stage and a new second stage. So we haven't even gotten through the first flight. And in all of our margin calculations, we also take into account the fact that we may scrub a launch. So even today's operation, where we have pressurized and we have stressed the vehicle a little bit, that's taken into account in our design and our qualification testing. The other good thing is that the most stressing part of the flight for the Falcon 9 on the first stage is the re-entry. So we didn't even get through that. So we're sitting here on the pad. It's a fairly straightforward situation and not stressing on the Falcon 9. And on the Dragon spacecraft, with the human rating factors to carry crew, there is enough factors of safety, margins of safety, redundancy, that just having two people on board and closing the hatch and even pressurizing the propellant system does not eat into the margins of the vehicle.
Offloads continue nominally 30% on stage 1
So
launch,
right now everything's continuing to
stage
offload. The automatic sequences that we use routinely, both at the launch sites, Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral, even Vandenberg Air Force Base, as well as in our Texas test site for first and second stage. Those sequences are running. Propellant is coming off of the vehicle per plan. And we see Bob and Doug up in the Dragon spacecraft, just waiting when we can get up there, open the hatch, and help them egress and come on back down the tower. And the other thought I had, Dan and Jesse, is right now we are coming up on what would have been T0. And I'm wondering 10 minutes from now whether the weather officer would turn around and say, yes, it turned good. You just didn't have a long enough window. We only had 1 second and we needed 10 minutes. So we'll have to ask offline and say, hey, did the weather conditions improve? And one thing I'll tag on to that Dan was mentioning and Jesse was talking about, the launch opportunities. The launch window does move earlier on Saturday a little bit. So it just happened to be Orbital Dynamics said today, if you want to go to the International Space Station and you want to launch northeast, which is the approved trajectory, you have to go right at 4:35 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. You pick another day, the T0 moves. It's just luck of the draw. We might have been doing this at 8 in the morning when we were getting lightning, or we could have been doing it a few hours from now when conditions may have been acceptable. So in the end, we can all look at Isaac Newton and Johannes Kepler for orbital dynamics telling us when do we launch, and that stuck us right in the middle of a period of bad weather. So there's my science lesson for today, Dan and Jesse.
Appreciate that, John. That helps soften the blow of just moving past that T-0 time. But for anybody, if you're just now tuning in, wondering why Falcon 9 is still sitting there on the pad as we move past that T0, we did have a scrub for weather today, just not able to clear all of those constraints. We keep a very close eye on the weather around the pad and their whole way
Dragon
uphill.
SpaceX for weather.
Right now, Bob and Doug are still inside of
Dragon, go ahead for weather.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you some more words on the scrub rationale. Yeah, so we basically scrubbed due to 3 rules that we were violating. All 3 would have been expected to clear 10 minutes after our T0 time. And those 3 were natural lightning, the fuel mills, and the attached anvil.
Yeah, we copy, Jay. We appreciate that update. We could see some raindrops on the windows and just figured that whatever it was too close to the launch pad at the time we needed it not to be. So we appreciate that and understand that everybody's probably a little bit bummed out. It's just part of the deal. Everybody was ready today, and we appreciate that. And the ship was great. And we'll do it again, I think, on Saturday.
Copy all. And yeah, we concur. And appreciate your resilience sitting there in the vehicle for us.
We got the easy job. Nothing better than being prime crew on a new spaceship.
Copy that.
All right, some great words from Bob and Doug. They're feeling good inside Dragon. They'll be ready to go when we make our next attempt on Saturday. Right now, we're just still waiting for all of the fuel to come off the Falcon 9 rocket. After
Stage 1
that,
LOX and fuel roughly 20%, and Stage 2 fuel 36%.
and so that call right there, we're still at a little over 20% on fuel, RP1, and LOX, liquid oxygen on the first stage, and then at about 26% on RP1 on that second stage. So again, it takes about 40 minutes once the process starts, so we should have right around 30 minutes or so until all that fuel's off. And then the crew will get to go to disarm the launch escape system. We'll see that crew access arm swing back into place, and they can begin to egress or get out of the Dragon spacecraft.
And you heard it live, that weather update of what we violated. We were just 10 minutes off, unfortunately, but again, today was an instantaneous launch. And as John explained, it's due to the orbital mechanics and making sure that at the time we launch, it will allow us to get to the space station on time and accurately. So you can see on your right screen, Bob and Doug are patiently waiting. They do still have their visors on and still strapped into their seats. The launch escape system is still armed right now as we are offloading fuel, and will not disarm until prop offload is complete. And this is just to ensure the safety of Bob and Doug and make sure that they can egress safely from the rocket.
And just a reminder, today, just this first attempt, we're going to be right back here looking like on Saturday for attempt number 2. Launch America is not going anywhere. still on the track to get Bob and Doug into space, get this Crew Dragon up to the International Space Station. So it's always good. If you're going to scrub, probably rather scrub for weather than an issue on either Falcon 9 or Dragon. And we weren't tracking any issues with the flight systems throughout our countdown today. Everything passed with leak checks on the hatches and the crew suits. All the communications working great. All the teams were ready to go. So as John and I said, always nice to have a little bit more practice, and we'll be right back at it on Saturday.
What would this launch be if it wasn't even more exciting to try and launch today, and now we have to push it to Saturdays?
Really got to build the suspense.
Yes. So.
Hey, Dan and Jesse. Another thought crossed my mind while I'm watching the diagram here showing fuel is just about off. First and second stage, we're down under 10%. LOX is also just about off of first stage.
10%.
Yep, we're getting the announcement.
Fuels roughly 20%.
Stage 2 fuels at 20%. Stage 1 LOX is under 10%. So just continuing to come off of the vehicle as expected. On the monitor, Bob and Doug continue with visors down. Their launch escape system is armed, as we've mentioned. If there is anything that were happen to go wrong right now, they still have the viable pad abort means, something that we demonstrated way back in 2015 on one of these webcasts when we fired the Dragon capsule using the 8 Super Dracos off of the launch pad and it splashed down offshore in the Atlantic Ocean. So they're staying there with the system armed until all the hazards are essentially removed and we bring the crew access arm around them. We're standing by a minute. We're going to listen to Launch Director talking to the weather officer.
If you're just now tuning in, we did not launch today. We did have a scrub because of weather, but as we were saying, we are looking forward to trying this again on Saturday. Our launch time on Saturday will be another instantaneous window, so we'll have to have the weather cooperate again, and that launch time will be at 3:22 p.m. Eastern. I think our last weather update put us at about 40% probability of violation. John and I can check me real quick.
Yeah, Dan, what I saw coming out of the Air Force was 40% probability of violation, I believe. It's always tough because they report in terms of violation, and the optimists have to subtract that from 100% to go, hey, 60% chance, I'll plan my picnic. We were listening, the SpaceX launch director, Mike Taylor, was talking to the launch weather officer asking about the 3 criteria that scrubbed us today. It sounds like in another minute or two, the lightning and the attached anvil cloud rules will clear. The field mill rule, charge in the atmosphere, is still bouncing around, and so, hey, we may need several more minutes before that one would clear. So we'd need even longer than 10 minutes in the window today, it looks like, for all the rules to clear. That brings up what I wanted to mention a little while ago. I got lost listening to the weather brief. But there are a lot of folks who are going, why an instantaneous launch window for Falcon 9 and Dragon? Now, typically when we go to the space station, when we do the mission planning, it's an instantaneous window. There may be enough performance in the rocket to launch somewhere in a 5-minute period, but you've got to pick a time in there. But in the case of Falcon 9, once we start propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes, it doesn't matter so much if you can move 5 or 10 minutes left or right, because the whole sequence is scripted. We do the flight analysis assuming that the temperatures of the propellants are below a certain amount so that we know how much performance is available to the rocket, how much margin we're going to have. So essentially, if you start the countdown, 4 hours, 8 hours out like we were doing today, and you have a very short window, once you get into propellant loading at T-minus 35 minutes, you have to go as soon as you get to 0. We don't have the ability to stop the countdown, wait 5 minutes. Now all of a sudden the liquid oxygen starts warming up from 340 degrees below 0 in the ground system, and that changes how much performance you get carrying into orbit, and we don't want to cut into those margins. Now, if we had had something like a 4-hour window, which some communication satellites have, we could actually get down to almost zero, hold the count, detank the Falcon 9, wait a while, it takes us about an hour and a half, reload a whole new batch of cold liquid oxygen and fuel from the big storage tank that we've got there at Pad 39A, and try to launch again. But in that case, you have to be able to launch, about an hour and a half or so later after you scrub. And in the case of the International Space Station, an hour and a half from now, it's nowhere near where we need to be to get to orbit with the performance of the Falcon 9 and the Dragon. So today, it's a combination. We start the day with a 1-second window.
Yeah, just informing you, it's
but
been
once
2
we
hours,
get inside of 35 minutes, it becomes an instantaneous window for the Falcon 9, regardless of what the customer may be able to give us. So there's a little explanation for folks who are wondering why we have such a tight window.
Okay,
right now, it looks like we are bringing the
so,
last bits of fuel off of the stage, and liquid oxygen is just about off of the stage. So things are clocking right along per the 40-minute timeline. Everything looks good, and we'll wait to hear that we're clear, and then when we get the call for Bob and Doug to go ahead and disarm launch escape system, and the crew access arm will watch come back out, center itself around the Dragon hatch, and then the ingress team will go up there and open the hatch.
Thank you for the science lesson, John I.
Hey, no charge.
Much appreciated.
We did hear a quick call to the crew there. We should be just under 10 minutes away from that prop offload completing. It looks like we're just tracking
Stage 2
the
fuel
RP1
offload is complete.
And there we have the confirmation. Stage 2 offload's complete. And we should have now just the RP1, so that densified propellant, or the RP1 is kerosene. We should be under 10%, a little under 10 minutes until that's off. And then we'll step through those events we were discussing, where they'll be able to disarm the launch escape system, get the arm back out there, and Bob and Doug can begin to exit the Dragon spacecraft. Still not the friendliest skies in the background.
That is Florida, though. The weather is constantly changing over there, which is why we always have to keep an eye on it through every single launch that we have out there. Bob and Doug are patiently waiting. As you can see, that is a live view of them on the Crew Dragon vehicle as they're waiting prop offload to complete. Second stage prop offload is complete. We are just waiting on first stage to complete.
Stage 1 LOX offload is complete. Waiting on stage 1 fuel in roughly 5 minutes or so.
And again, the launch escape system is still armed. We are waiting for a prop offload to complete before they disarm that, and then they will be able to egress from the Crew Dragon vehicle.
And we just heard we should be just under 5 minutes away from the last of that fuel coming out of the Falcon 9 first stage. And then we'll see those events start to pick back up, and we'll see the crew arm swing back out. They've been in those seats for a couple hours now. They typically get inside of Dragon a little over 2.5 hours ahead of launch. So they've been strapped into these seats for quite a while. They are custom sized, though, so they're as comfortable and as snug as possible. Obviously, since they're going to be in them for a really long time. But most importantly, when you're doing that splashdown at the very end of the mission, it's your car seat, and splashing down or landing on land is not the most gentle of procedures in a capsule. So just really making sure that they're snug inside of that Dragon capsule. But we should be a little under 5 minutes away from the prop offload being completed.
And as Dan mentioned, those suits are custom made, but the seats are also custom fit for each astronaut as well. They do remain on Crew Dragon for this mission for almost 24 hours about. So we do want to make sure that they are comfortable. and make sure that the suits and the seats are comfortable enough for them to stay in that position for a while. I believe when they get into orbit, they are allowed to get out of their seats and get a little bit more comfortable, but it's a long ride for them.
Yeah, once they do get on orbit, they are able to get out of the seats and actually out of their suits too, since for this flight path today, it was going to take them about 19 hours. So Bob and Doug would actually have had about 8 hours to sleep on board the Dragon capsule. So we weren't able to launch today, though. The rendezvous on Saturday should be very similar to what we would have had if we launched today, where it'll take them about 19 hours to get to the International Space Station. So they'll launch and they'll have a number of different events that we'll be able to walk you through, including manual piloting of Dragon and just really putting the spacecraft through all of the paces before it arrives at the International Space Station. Because again, this is a test flight, and this is this last test before we certify the Dragon spacecraft for regular crewed flights, which will just be bringing up those long duration, 6-month, maybe even a year-long missions.
Right. And it should be a very exciting test flight because it's pretty much like an actual mission. When Bob and Doug get on the station, they will be performing some research while they're up there and performing tests and doing some final things for this demonstration mission.
But I mean, just for right now, we are just going to continue to stay with them until we see them come out of Dragon, because the launch escape system's still armed while we wait for this propellant offload to complete. That's just done as a safety measure. Anytime you have rocket propellants beneath you, you want to make sure that we have a good way for them to get out of the way. And so we should be within just a couple of minutes for that final bit of RP1 coming off the first stage, and then we'll hear the crew get the go to disarm that launch escape system. We'll see the crew access arm swing back in. But if you're just tuning in, expecting them to be in space, we did have a scrub today due to weather. Our next launch attempt is going to be this Saturday, May 30th at 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time. And just like we did today, we're going to be bringing you every single step of the way. It's going to look a little familiar if you watched all of today's, but it's going to be just as exciting.
I can imagine it might even be more exciting with all the anticipation that we've hyped this launch up for with already going through it all today. But again, the more practice we have, the better off we will be. Hopefully next launch attempt, we will have a flawless launch and actually be able to lift off with good weather.
Yeah, weather is going to be the big thing that we'll continue to watch. That was the culprit today for our scrub. And our initial weather reports already looking at about a 40% probability of violation. So as John and I was saying, the optimists in us have to say that's 60% good. So we're going to look at the good side of this, and that's roughly what we were in the days leading up to this. We won't have a rogue tropical storm forming off of South Carolina on us on Saturday, but Florida weather will always be dynamic, so we'll just continue to track and hopefully get a good chance hit that window on Saturday.
And just a reminder, everything else on the vehicle and for the mission was looking good today. It was just the weather, which, as John I said earlier, and Lauren even referred to him mentioning this, weather is the one thing that we actually cannot control on our missions. So unfortunately, it did cause us to scrub today. But the vehicles are healthy. Bob and Doug were ready, and they should be ready to go again with the next launch attempt on Saturday.
Just looking at our data, it looks like that RP1 is just about all out. So we'll just kind of stand by for a few more moments. Hopefully we get that call soon, John I.
Yeah, I was going to, while we're waiting to hear the call that the last percentage of fuel is off, I was going to comment on Jesse's discussion about it was just the weather. I think during this countdown, there were more words said about the weather than everything else.
Uh-huh.
I'm listening right now to a weather discussion in the background.
Yeah, and again, for people wondering if we knew that we did have bad weather, even from this morning, again, we do monitor this all the way down all the way down to the final minutes of the countdown. And with Florida weather being pretty sporadic, sometimes we have even hurricanes coming through or bad weather coming through and passing 20 minutes later and having good weather for a launch. So this is why we continued to attempt to launch today, but unfortunately 4T0 today, weather was not on our side.
Yeah, and Jesse, this is John again. I dropped off to listen to a weather discussion. They were just giving the times. The lightning rule went green, so we could have gone without a lightning concern. The attached anvil rule cleared, but the field mill rule is expected to clear at 58 minutes after the hour. So that's another 4.5 minutes from now. So we were close, but we needed about 25 minutes later launch time. It does remind me, at risk of offending some people, but the old saying that says it's better to be on the ground wishing you were flying than flying wishing you were on the ground.
Yes, definitely. Safety first, always, and making sure that when Bob and Doug do fly, they are flying safely and as planned. So again, this is standard procedure for us to make sure that they do have a safe flight to the International Space Station.
All right, well, for now, we're just continuing to stand by, expecting the call that all of that prop has now been offloaded from Falcon 9.
All right, venting vehicle tanks to nominal TPC set points for crew ingress.
At this moment, the launch escape system still armed. Once the prop offload is complete, that'll be the next step in our procedures to have Bob and Doug begin to make their way out of Dragon.
LD, countdown 1.
LD.
We have the prompt here for nominal crew egress.
Okay, so we're ready for launch escape system disarm.
As affirmed, ready for launch escape disarm.
MD copies. You guys are ready? We'll.
Yeah, launch team's ready. Go ahead and advise the crew.
Yeah, Dragon SpaceX, you copied that discussion. So with that, you are go for disarming launch escape system per section 2 of 5.100.
We'll put that in work. Section 2, disarming the launch escape system.
All right, that was the call we were waiting for, propelling off of Falcon 9. So Doug Hurley, Bob Behnken now going to disarm the launch escape system on Dragon. And once that's disarmed, those 8 Super Draco engines will be out of the mix.
SpaceX Dragon launch escape system has been disarmed into Alpha Decimal 3.
Copy that. We concur.
And showing then confirmed the launch escape system has been disarmed.
And Dragon SpaceX, with that confirmation, you are go to open your visors and proceed to section 3.
Okay, we'll open the visors and go to section 3.
As you heard and you can see, Bob and Doug can now open their visors and get ready for exiting the vehicle. Again, they kept their visors on while the launch escape system was armed, while prop offloading was continuing, and that is just to make sure that they are safe. Now that there is no more propellant on any of the vehicles, they are safe to have disarmed the launch escape system and now are getting ready for that crew arm to swing back the hatch to open and for them to egress.
SpaceX Dragon with an update. We're holding in 3.4 and we're ready for seat rotation when you are.
Copy that. We'll wait for the closeout team to open the hatch and verify clearance, and then we can execute seat rotation.
Dragon cap.
And there's that crew arm swinging back towards Dragon. Once that crew arm is in place, they will be able to open the hatch on Crew Dragon. Bob and Doug's seats will rotate back out of launch position so that they can safely get out of their seats and egress the vehicle.
And we heard they'll have what they call nominal egress, so just the normal procedures for getting them out of the capsule. That means the same closeout team that was there to get them in will be able to assist as they come out. They'll arrive and get that hatch open, and then they'll be able to rotate the seats. That'll rotate Bob and Doug pretty much forward, where they'll be in the original position that the seats were configured when they made their way into Dragon. It just gets them a little bit out and under the displays and makes getting in and out of the capsule a little bit easier. They've been in those seats for about 3 hours at this point, so definitely a long day for the crew. As they woke up about 6 hours prior to our T-0, had their breakfast, which we confirmed was steak and eggs, at least for Doug Hurley. And then they proceeded through all of the suit up and the trip to the pad, making their way inside Dragon, where they've been for about the last 3 hours at this point. We were on track for an on-time liftoff right at 4:33 p.m. Eastern time, but did have to scrub a little under 17 minutes before launch due to weather. So for now, we've offloaded all of the propellant off of Falcon 9. The launch escape system has been disarmed. That crew access arm is back right up next to Dragon, as you can see in that view on the left. Pretty soon we'll see the teams arrive to get the hatch open, get Bob and Doug out, and they'll make their way back to crew quarters and their quarantine. It is important to note that throughout the entire process of them getting into Dragon, suiting up all of those different steps, they maintain that same quarantine that they've been in since for about 2 weeks now, and that is specifically for events like today, where we have to scrub and just go to another day. So we don't want to break that quarantine once we're putting them into that launch vehicle, and that's a standard quarantine that we have for any crew members flying to the International Space Station. The current COVID-19 pandemic obviously puts a little bit of extra pressure and a little bit of an extra spotlight on that, but they're following a lot of the same procedures that we have in place just to keep crew members healthy before they go and spend several months in space in an enclosed environment with just a couple of other people.
Right, and it's a little bit more difficult to get them help on the space station, right? So we want to make sure that when they do head up to the space station, that they are fully healthy. So this, again, is standard procedure, not just because of this pandemic that's going on. This is a standard procedure for astronauts to quarantine prior to heading to the station. And as Dan mentioned, this is a standard procedure to exit the vehicle as well. We did scrub today, but this is not an emergency state. This is standard procedure. This is something that is practiced and rehearsed and made sure that we do follow.
Turn to the pad. As a reminder, around the pad, the Air Force and NASA set up roadblocks to make sure nobody gets into the hazard area. So they will head to the roadblocks, they'll pull them open so that they can drive to the pad. So launch director, I think, is estimating it's still about 15 minutes for the crew to drive all the way down out to 39A, get up the tower, and then begin operations on the hatch. They have confirmed that the purge of the Dragon service section, which is nitrogen during the countdown to avoid an oxygen leak, that is back on air now. The crew access arm is on air, so they're ready for the egress team to get up into the tower. But it's going to take them a little bit still, I think, to drive down the road in the vehicles and go up the elevator. But everything continuing to run per a normal scrub countdown. which we have had the opportunity to practice with the crew in, for example, the dry dress rehearsal last Saturday after we had done the static fire of the Falcon 9 the day before.
And I've been seeing a few questions, people asking why aren't we just trying to launch tomorrow? As John and I was talking us through, there's some very specific times you have to identify when you're going to be able to link up with the International Space Station. You'll only have so much fuel, which can only generate so much energy to make sure you're going to intersect with the station, which is flying at over 17,000 miles an hour. So you're hitting
Dragon
one
SpaceX
bullet with another
comms.
bullet. Some of our other launch attempts are able to make it
Go
to
ahead.
station, but have much longer
Yeah, Dragon,
times.
to prevent us from losing comms, we're going to be switching to umbilical at this time. I'm going to be unmerging Countdown 1, but we'll keep you updated here on Dragon Ground.
Okay, yeah, we see the Tidris countdown with a little over 3 minutes. We'll stand by for your next call on umbilical.
Copy.
The crew getting a call, they're just going to reconfigure some communications. But as to why we're not launching, say, tomorrow...
And core on Countdown 1, loops are merged.
But when we pick our launch attempts, we also have to take in mind some of the human factors of these attempts. Some of these other launch attempts may exist, but it would require Dragon taking in excess of 30 or more hours potentially to reach the station, which could wreak some havoc with the sleep shifts cycles, not only for Bob and Doug, but also for the crew on board station that has to line up their sleep schedule with Bob and Doug as they arrive. And the crews on station and Bob and Doug will be operating off of Greenwich Mean Time once they get there.
Dragon SpaceX, comm check, umbilical.
SpaceX Dragon loud and clear on umbilical.
Copy, heavy the same.
Still getting good comm between the crew and the core here in Hawthorne. But really, just to sum it up, we pick our launch attempts for a number of reasons, not just can we make it to the station, but just how long is it going to take to get there. And that's why Saturday is going to be our best option. We're going to be targeting that one at 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time for our next attempt. And it'll be a little over 19, maybe a little over 20 hours until we actually arrive at the space station if we're able to get off the ground on Saturday.
And this gives Bob and Doug, a few days to kind of shake off the nerves from today's launch attempt, give them some more time to rest, and again, get ready for our launch attempt on Saturday. And if you're just now joining us, we did scrub our Demonstration 2 mission today. And as John mentioned, we are waiting for the egress team to make it back to the launch pad, head up the tower, and help the crew, or help Bob and Doug egress the vehicle.
Dragon SpaceX for closeout team status.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the closeout team has arrived at the pad and they are proceeding to the White Room.
Copy that.
You heard that call out. The egress team is at the pad and are proceeding to meet Bob and Doug in the White Room, where they can open the hatch and help them exit the vehicle.
But we'll continue to stick with Bob and Doug until we see that hatch get open and them start to make their way out. And then they're going to... Oh, and there we can get some views once more back at the pad. You can see that egress team moving back in. They were wearing the black clean suits that we saw as they were helping Bob and Doug get into the Dragon just several hours ago. They're now going to get on the elevator, make their way back up, down the crew access arm, and then we'll get that Dragon side hatch opened.
And as we saw earlier, this is a very tall structure, but that elevator is pretty quick there. So we saw them enter the bottom of the tower. It should be a very short time before they make it to the top and are able to get to the White Room and open the hatch for Bob and Doug.
If you want.
And it should just be a few more moments. We'll see that closeout team make their way back into the crew access arm and down the hatchway. And again, if you are just now tuning in, we did have that scrub just about a little under 17 minutes before launch. Our next launch attempt is going to be this Saturday, May 30th. At launch time, it's going to be another instantaneous launch time. It's going to be 3:22 p.m. Eastern time over there in Florida. And assuming an on-time launch, it'll be a pretty similar flight that we were looking at today, where it'll be roughly about 19 hours before they make that initial contact to the International Space Station. They'll get on orbit and execute a series of 5 different burns to gradually raise their orbit until they're just a few hundred meters below the station and maybe a few kilometers behind. And then they'll do all of the final approach initiation maneuvers. And by that point, the team here in Hawthorne will be working very closely with the team down in Houston in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Weather for Saturday still not ideal, but it's roughly what we started out with today, where we have about a 40% chance, possibility of violation, and it'll be tracking a lot of the same issues with cumulus clouds and potential precipitation. We'll also be keeping an eye on all of the downrange weather. Oh, it looks like we're seeing some people start to make their way into the crew access arm now, so we should see them get that Dragon side hatch open in just a few minutes. But as a reminder, we'll be looking at weather around the launch pad and weather downrange in their flight path on the way to orbit, and that's always checked just in case they have to do any kind of emergency maneuver and land down in the Atlantic Ocean. We will be making sure that the weather is at acceptable levels all the way until they're into space. So you can see the team coming down now. Should see the hatch open momentarily, and then we can begin to get Bob and Doug out of the Dragon spacecraft.
Yeah, the closeout team is at the White Room. They are configuring the crew arm for egress, expected to take no earlier than 10 minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes. Thank you.
It should be just about 10 minutes. As a reminder, they're in the White Room. We walked through that a little bit earlier in our coverage this morning. The White Room name simply because of its color, and that's something that started all the way back during earlier Gemini missions. And that is literally the last place on planet Earth where astronauts are standing before they get loaded into this vehicle. It has an environmental control apparatus and a seal that it can put right up against the Dragon spacecraft just to keep all of that dust, dirt, and Florida humidity
And Dragon
out of the
SpaceX,
capsule.
we're right at 3 hours in seat rotation. I just wanted to check in with you on comfort levels.
I'd say no changes, Jay. It hasn't been too bad at all.
Copy all.
And obviously at this point, with the launch escape system disarmed, we have loosened up straps and gotten our feet out of the straps on the bottom of the seat, so it's a little more comfortable anyway.
Copy all. Looks comfortable.
Right now, the closeout team just going to take a couple of minutes to configure the White Room. They'll set up a seal between it and the Dragon spacecraft just to make sure we're not letting anything from the surrounding environment get into that spacecraft, which is kept very pristine, obviously, for the crew members once they're inside. They have a small bridge that just connects the crew arm to the capsule itself. Just making sure they have a nice clear path for their entrance and exit from the spacecraft. So it should just be a few more minutes. We'll see that hatch get opened, and then our crew members can start to make their way out. And you heard seat rotation. They rotate the seats prior to their actual flight to where they're a little bit more parallel to the ground, and that just puts them directly in front of those displays. We'll see them rotate down, just giving them easy access to get out of the capsule.
And as Dan mentioned, we want to keep FOD out of the capsule. FOD is foreign object debris, so that's basically anything that does not belong inside of the vehicle. So not just like dirt and dust, but just anything that was not meant to be inside of there should not be there. So we are doing everything as a standard procedure to make sure that we do keep FOD out, especially since this is going to be another attempt and another opportunity for FOD to enter the vehicle. As they're exiting, we still make sure that we keep everything basically like a clean room.
Dragon SpaceX, you may hear some vehicle venting in about 20 seconds.
Copy.
These days, people are wondering how and when the global economy will recover from its current downturn. eToro
John Isberger here with the webcast desk in Hawthorne, California. We are continuing to wait for the crew to open the side hatch. We've got the camera showing astronauts Doug Hurley, Bob Behnken inside. Visors are up. They've gotten their feet out of the restraints. Gloves are off in case of Doug, it looks like. And the team is just outside the hatch. They're going through the sequence right now, make sure pressure checks are all good, make sure there are no concerns with gases, be it the propellants of the vehicle or just nitrogen gas that we use as a purge. Currently, we are coming up on about 50 minutes after the plan T0. To just reiterate what Dan and Jesse have been talking about earlier, we had a good countdown. I had a lot of fun saying there were no issues on Falcon 9 or Dragon of a technical sort. The range was ready to support. The downrange weather looked good in case Dragon had to make a unplanned abort splashdown in an escape maneuver somewhere in the Atlantic. And we even had the, once we get on orbit, in case Dragon had to re-enter and come back early, the weather was good in the Pacific in case it had to come down. So everything was looking our way except Mother Nature, the weather. It's Florida, and we got into the back end of the tropical storm that has now gone ashore in the Carolinas. But unfortunately, that left everything disrupted just enough to where we violated several of the weather rules, and we did not have enough time for them to go green. Green meaning where the range says conditions are clear and you are all right to launch. We were still red on those rules, and that was the end of the countdown for the day. Again, we scrubbed at T-minus 16 minutes, 54 seconds. That was shortly before we were due to begin loading the liquid oxygen onto the second stage. That was both the logical breakpoint in the countdown procedure where we could take a scrub without loading one more propellant on the vehicle. And at the same time, that was when the range gave us the final bad news that we weren't going to get green conditions before the clock ran.
Dragon SpaceX, for status, it looks like the closeout team is inflating the hatch seal, the arm seal right now.
Okay, yeah, we can see some folks outside the window.
right, we've been quiet for a few minutes, but if you're just now tuning in, we did not launch today. We did have to scrub today's mission due to weather. We were just under 17 minutes away from our T0 time at 4:33 Eastern when the call was made. We were still in violation of a few of the weather constraints that just are really there to inform teams when it's safe to launch. So we're looking at weather both around the pad and weather all the way on the way to orbit for them. So we did have to scrub. Since then, we've been able to get all of the propellant off of Falcon 9. The launch escape system has been disarmed. And right now, the closeout teams are there in the white room. So right at the end of that crew access arm, they're configuring the big seal that goes around the Dragon capsule just to make sure its environment is isolated from all that nasty Florida weather. And then they'll be able to get the hatch open, and we'll get Bob and Doug back out.
We're coming up on just under an hour since the planned T0. Again, if you're just joining us, well, we've been here summing up for a while.
Dragon SpaceX for status.
Yep, stand by for status check.
Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, closeout team's still working to do the hatch seal inflation. Expect another 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. We scrubbed at T-minus 16 minutes, 54 seconds. We violated 3 weather rules. The weather rules finally cleared up, but it was long after the planned T0. The SpaceX egress team did return to the pad. They were sent through the roadblocks that surround the pad, demarcating where the hazard area is. Team's up on the crew arm, and as you just heard, SpaceX talking to astronauts Bob and Doug. They're working the seal around Dragon. Then we make sure that Dragon capsule pressure is equalized with the crew arm, and then we'll go into the hatch opening sequence. So we've still got several more minutes. We'll carry that as we go. A couple of points to bring up. Once the crew comes off of the Dragon and comes back down, goes back to the crew quarters to de-suit, we will be
Dragon
leaving.
SpaceX for awareness. We're going to command the vehicle into pad hatch open in preparation for hatch opening.
Copy that.
Okay, that's good. That'll get them into the sequence to make sure that the pressures inside and outside
And
are
note,
equal.
this will equalize cabin pressure, so you may notice something there.
Okay, thanks.
So as I started to mention, once everybody's off, we'll leave the Falcon 9 Dragon, the crew arm, where they are. That is in the launch support position. There's no plan to come back down to horizontal. The vehicle is designed to stay vertical. Now, if we were to find something wrong during the countdown as we go through data review, that could mean that we have to come horizontal, as we did late last night, early this morning, as we were working a ground issue on the transporter erector. And then we went right back up. But currently, no plans to come horizontal. We'll stay vertical up to the next launch attempt on Saturday. There will also be, as is typical, engineers will go through all of the data they collected today, and then there will be a report out in what's called a Delta Launch Readiness Review, probably this Friday before we get into the next launch attempt on Saturday. That's where the engineering disciplines will brief management, chief engineer, launch director, mission director, the NASA customer, where we stand on today's countdown, what we learned as well as our readiness to proceed into another countdown attempt. But currently at Kennedy Space Center at historic Pad 39A, we're getting ready for the hatch opening and the crew to be able to leave Dragon, come back down, get out of their suits, and wait to go another day, hopefully this coming Saturday, the 30th.
And Dragon SpaceX, sure you see the vehicles in pad hatch open. The AVVs are now open, and that nitrox injection is complete.
Yep, we felt it and heard it, and copy all.
And Dragon SpaceX for status, the closeout team is stepping into hatch opening now.
Copy.
John Innsbrucker back here at the webcast desk in Hawthorne, California. We've got another camera up, and you can see the side-by-side view on the monitor. Astronauts Bob and Doug inside, waiting for the hatch to come open. We're still in the middle of a equalization step. Make sure that pressure inside the Dragon is equal to the ambient pressure, so that when we open the hatch, it just comes open without any extra force. You can also see the SpaceX team is up alongside the capsule. They are removing essentially the thermal protection devices. You know, for example, if you have a door handle on your automobile, if you're going to have to re-enter from outer space, you're going to have to put a small heat shield over that door handle. Otherwise, any kind of protuberances, cavities could be subject to burn-up. So they have to take their time, make sure that we get all of the thermal protection safety devices off so that they can then get access to the mechanism to go ahead and bring the hatch open. So what you are watching right now on the left monitor is the egress team going through the steps. This is typical. We're not hearing any chatter over the pad net that they're having any problems. They just take their time and make sure that everybody's ready to bring the hatch open when they finally get there. So currently we are T plus 1 hour and 11 minutes or so since the planned launch. Obviously, we're still on the ground as we're going through the post-scrub operations to bring astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken out of the capsule. And you can see now hatch is coming open. There's a view from the camera inside the capsule. You can see the hatch area. Crew gave a quick wave to the ground crew when it came open. And right now they should be inspecting the area underneath the seats so that we can command the seats to rotate back into the ingress-egress position, make it a little easier on Bob and Doug to get in and out of the seats.
Dragon SpaceX, just for awareness, they have a few more steps in their procedure, and they should be calling to us for seat rotation shortly.
Okay, copy that. Yep, we see them working on that. And just as a lead into that, we are ready for the seat rotation. So just let us know when you're start.
We'll go.
Here's the confirmation from the Dragon team talking to the astronauts that they're just about ready to send the seat rotation command. Again, the ground crew is verifying, making sure that none of the cargo that's packed in Dragon underneath the crew, nothing is in the way, nothing came loose. You're looking at one row of crew seating, but there is as we've mentioned before,
and there it
Dragon
is.
designed
You're
to carry
looking
up
at
to
the
7.
American-made rocket
But
and
on this flight,
spacecraft
for
that will
example,
return American
much of the
astronauts
cargo
to
that
the
we're
International
carrying
Space
is
Station
loaded
from
in
American
various
soil
areas down below
for the
where
first
the
time
astronauts are
since the
seated.
retirement of the
So they're
space
just
shuttle,
verifying
last
nothing's
flown
in the
nearly
way,
9
so
years
that
ago.
when they send the
Today, we're
rotation
giving it another
command,
shot with our
the
partners at
seats will
SpaceX.
pivot
Wednesday's
without
first attempt was
encumbrance.
postponed due to that wild weather. But if all goes well today, we will mark a new first in NASA's storied history and usher in the commercial crew era of American spaceflight.
At 3:32 Eastern Time this afternoon,
That's
NASA
really
astronauts
driving
Doug
there.
Hurley
Yeah,
and
new
Bob
era,
Behnken
much
are
safer design.
expected to lift
Yeah,
off
absolutely.
from Pad
Thanks for
39A
walking us through that, Lauren.
aboard
Again,
SpaceX's Crew
the
Dragon
launch escape
spacecraft
system is
atop a
armed.
Falcon 9
That
rocket.
protects Bob
If
and
the weather
Doug so that if
cooperates,
something were to
today's
go
attempt
wrong,
will
they
mark
can shoot off of the
SpaceX's
pad away
first
from the
ever flight with
rocket
crew
and parachute
the
to
beginning
safety
of
in
a
the
new
ocean.
chapter in human
That is such a
spaceflight.
crucial safety
Good afternoon
capability.
and welcome
And
back
so
to
now we
Kennedy
want to go
Space
over to
Center, home
Hawthorne
of the
for an
wild
operational
Florida weather,
update
which
with
is why
John.
we're sitting inside again today, but this time a little bit closer.
Thanks,
with some
Marie.
plexiglass
We
in
are
here.
counting down those final
And I'm
minutes.
Lauren Lyons,
Everything
a
is still
senior
looking good on
Starlink
the Falcon
development
9 and the
engineer at
Dragon
SpaceX.
vehicles for
And
an
joining
on-time
us
launch.
today
But
is
weather
retired
is
astronaut
trending the
and
wrong way
NASA
right
Meatball
now.
lover,
We're
Leland.
keeping our ears open in case we hear that the weather is going to be no-go for the rest of the count. Right now, we are counting down at T-minus 32 minutes.
Stage 1 locks and
Falcon 9
RP1
did
fluorides
begin
are nominal.
propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes, right on time. The propellants we use on Falcon 9 are a fuel, which is rocket-grade kerosene, also called RP1, refined petroleum. We use an oxidizer, and that's the super chill liquid oxygen, or LOX as we call it. Those two propellants...
Space Shuttle Atlantis launching to the International Space Station and building out the International Space Station. So now Doug and Bob can launch Crew Dragon and go to an assembly-complete space station.
Yeah, and I know it's been really touch and go with the weather. We were looking at it last night. We were looking at it this morning. The teams are going to continue to monitor things, so it's kind of touch and go. But at last check, it was a 50-50 chance. So hopefully those odds are going to be, I don't know if they're going to improve, but 50-50 is not bad. It could be worse, right? So we have teams all over the country covering the action from SpaceX headquarters in California, Mission Control in Houston, and our social media desk in Washington, and of course, right here in Florida.
Today's mission will be Crew Dragon's second test flight and its first test with humans on board. We're a little more than 4 hours away from liftoff. Bob and Doug have had their lunch and have completed their medical checks in advance of launch. In about 15 minutes, NASA is going to turn the crew over to the SpaceX team. And once that happens, there are a series of key milestones to complete as we count down to T0. The first one is suit up. Now, the suit-up room is located in NASA's Neil Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building, or the ONC. Here, the SpaceX team is going to help the astronauts put on their suits and perform key suit checkouts. From there, the next step is crew walkout. The astronauts are going to leave the ONC building for final goodbyes with friends and family gathered outside of the facility before they head out to the launch pad.
And following final goodbyes, the crew will get in a Tesla and begin the roughly 20-minute drive to pad 39A. Now, once at the pad, the crew will ascend the fixed service structure in order to board the spacecraft in a process we call crew ingress. During ingress, the SpaceX team will run a series of checks to ensure the suits, seats, and the vehicle interactions are all functioning properly.
And after all the vehicle and crew checkouts are completed, the SpaceX closeout team will close Dragon's hatch with Bob and Doug safe inside. About 40 minutes before launch, the crew access arm, which is that long suspended walkway that the astronauts are going to use to board Dragon, it's going to retract away, followed by the arming of the launch escape system.
Once the arm is retracted and the escape system is armed, that's when propellant loading on the Falcon 9 rocket will begin. About 5 minutes before liftoff, Dragon will be configured for what we call terminal count. This is when Dragon's onboard computers take control of the vehicle.
And at T0, again, a little over 4 hours from now, if all goes well and the weather cooperates, Crew Dragon and Falcon 9 will lift off from pad 39A, carrying astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. Roughly 12 minutes after liftoff, Dragon will separate from Falcon 9's second stage, enter its activation phase, and begin using its own onboard propulsion system to carry Bob and Doug to their destination, which is the International Space Station. And as I mentioned previously, Bob and Doug are just finishing up their lunch, and we are currently awaiting their arrival to the suit-up room.
And while we await that, you will notice over the course of this broadcast that we do not have crowds gathered here at Kennedy Space Center. And that, of course, is one of the impacts of our protocols to protect each other and our teams. We would normally have tens of thousands of guests here at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida to view the launch. But even though we couldn't host a lot of guests here, you can still join us through every step of this historic mission from wherever you are. We have a team dedicated to those of you following along on social media, and NASA's Tahira Allen is in Washington right now leading that effort. Hi, Tahira.
Hey, Marie, and hey, everyone out there. My name is Tahira Allen, and if you are one of the 4.9 million people tuning in on Wednesday, we are so glad to see you here again. If you weren't able to witness the pre-launch activities on Wednesday, you are in luck because I'm here to bring you all the excitement happening on social media around the nation. This is a big day for both NASA and SpaceX, and we are ready for you to be a part of it. We had a lot of people engaged on Wednesday, so we want to see if we can top that energy today. We will be sharing your photos and thoughts live on air during today's broadcast, so don't hold back and show us how you're getting ready for liftoff. You can join the conversation by using the hashtag LaunchAmerica on NASA's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. I'll be monitoring that hashtag LaunchAmerica all day to highlight your social media posts throughout the show. You'll also be able to engage in social media polls during today's broadcast. And so even if you tuned in before, these are brand new polls, so just head on over to NASA's Twitter to cast those votes. So I know most of you are tuning in from home today, but that doesn't mean you can't get involved in the action. Check out NASA's Instagram and Facebook to find our Launch America augmented reality filters. They place you right at Kennedy Space Center, and you can actually see the Falcon 9 rocket lift off in a pair of sunglasses. If you haven't already, be sure to check out our first ever global NASA social. So head on over to NASA's Facebook to join the group. We've got all new social badges, a nice fresh photo here, some Q&As with some very special guests, and also behind-the-scenes tours of Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And not to mention, just an awesome community of people excited to witness this moment. So, just right here, in training, getting ready for that Launch America. So if you're just tuning in, to get us started, we have a poll for you on Twitter right now. We want to know what NASA logo you are sporting for today's launch. The iconic meatball or the iconic worm? Head on over to NASA's Twitter to cast those votes. And with that, let's head back to Lauren at Kennedy Space Center. Lauren?
Thanks, Tahira. I don't want to sway the vote, but, you know, I'm all about that worm.
Meatball.
The debate rages on.
Aside from our debate, the purpose, or the main purpose of today's demonstration mission is to put Crew Dragon through the final operational tests to officially certify the vehicle for human spaceflight. The SpaceX and NASA teams have put years of work in development, testing, and training to get us here today. And now we are just around the corner from seeing Falcon 9, Crew Dragon, and Bob and Doug lift off for the first time, and doing it from that same historic launch pad that first sent humans to the moon more than 50 years ago.
Now, it's really good that we're inside today because I'm still ready to run across there and try to hitch a ride to space on that Crew Dragon. It's a beautiful vehicle what SpaceX and NASA have done together to create this incredible rocket. It makes me want to just run out that door right now and get out there.
Well, you're not allowed to leave today, but Leland, I don't know if you've seen some of the comments on social media. You've been nominated by a lot of followers to fly one of the future missions of Crew Dragon. So I don't know.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay.
So we are just about 3 miles from Launch Complex 39A. Leland, don't get any ideas. I know that's not that far. That's where liftoff will happen in a little over 4 hours. And so we want to check in now with the team at SpaceX Hawthorne, where NASA's Dan Hewitt and SpaceX's Jesse Anderson are keeping an ear on operations. Good morning, guys.
Hey, good morning, Marie. Thanks so much. First off, hashtag Team Worm. But hello from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. My name's Dan Hewitt. We're here for round 2 for this historic launch.
And Dan, we're so glad to have you back here today. Hopefully the weather is working in our favor today. It looks really sunny and nice out there, so fingers crossed. My name is Jesse Anderson, and I'm a lead manufacturing engineer here at SpaceX, and we are so honored to be NASA's partner in returning humans to space from the shores of Kennedy Space Center. 10 years ago, we sent the Dragon that's displayed right behind us on its first orbital demonstration flight, and I speak for all of us here at SpaceX when I say we could not be more Space Center. 10 years ago, we sent the Dragon that's displayed right behind us on its first orbital demonstration flight, and I speak for all of us here at SpaceX when I say we could not be more excited to finally be sending humans to the International Space Station.
And just as a refresher, today's mission is known as Demonstration Mission 2 or Demo 2. This is going to be the first time a commercially built spacecraft will launch people to the space station. Demo 2 is an end-to-end flight test from launch to docking all the way to splashdown in the Atlantic at the end of their mission. And this is the final test for NASA to certify SpaceX for regular crew flights to the space station. Right now, SpaceX and NASA have teams working together around the country. On the SpaceX side, they have teams at the Cape performing final launch day checkouts as we speak, just to make sure Dragon is healthy and good to go.
At the moment of liftoff, we will transfer authority over Dragon from our firing room in Florida to Mission Control here in Hawthorne. Mission Control will have insight and command of Dragon systems for the entirety of this upcoming mission. And since Dragon is a highly autonomous vehicle, our teams in Mission Control will be continuously monitoring the health and performance of the spacecraft through the entire duration of its journey. That's from liftoff all the way until Dragon splashes back down on Earth.
While there are a number of people on headset here in Mission Control right behind us, the mission director is the one in charge. It's also where the SpaceX Core, which stands for Crew Operations Responsible Engineer, who's essentially the voice talking to astronauts throughout their flight, will reside.
Dragon and Falcon 9 together have years of operational experience, or what we refer to as flight heritage. SpaceX has successfully completed 22 flights of Dragon to and from orbit since 2010, and that includes 21 trips to the International Space Station. And to get us where we are today, not only have we conducted thousands of hours of testing, but we've also enhanced and added a number of safety features to Dragon.
One of the most important safety features on Crew Dragon is the launch escape system. It's a huge advancement in the safety of human spaceflight, and SpaceX was able to demonstrate the system in 2 important tests. The first one coming back in 2015 with the pad abort test, which we're watching some video back from right now. And then a little bit more recently, last January of this year, the in-flight abort test. Dragon's launch escape system is outfitted with 8 Super Draco engines that are integrated directly into the spacecraft body. This enables Dragon to separate from Falcon 9 and carry astronauts to safety in case of an emergency on the launch pad or all the way up to orbit.
And in addition to the launch escape system, SpaceX has completed over 80 parachute tests, which includes nearly 30 tests of just the upgraded Mark III parachutes that's flying on today's vehicle. And that's to ensure a safe landing back on Earth, even in the unlikely event that one of those 4 main parachutes fails.
And we can't forget the significance of our first demonstration mission just last year, which itself was an end-to-end flight test to and from the International Space Station, just no actual humans on board. But now, though, let's go to the one and only SpaceX's principal integration engineer, John Insprucker, for our first status update. John?
Oh, you're so kind, Dan. Good morning from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. As Dan said, I'm John Insprucker, and I'll be bringing you status updates throughout today's countdown. We're currently just inside T-minus 4 hours, 9 minutes. Today, as mentioned, is our second launch attempt. The first attempt was scrubbed on the 27th. In that attempt, the team proceeded deep into the countdown, but when 3 weather rules concerning lightning and cloud cover were no-go, and there was no chance of improving, the SpaceX launch director stopped the countdown at just inside T-minus 17 minutes, and the launch was scrubbed. Now, following the scrub, we drained back the propellants from Falcon 9, and the crew left the capsule and returned to crew quarters. Now, since the scrub, Falcon 9 has remained vertical on the pad, as you can see there on the monitor. It's remained powered up. The launch crew currently reports no significant issues on the Falcon 9. Minimal activity has occurred on Dragon over the same period. The most significant task was topping off oxygen and nitrox in the environmental control system. Now, we just finished up a weather briefing to the crew a few minutes ago. Conditions at Kennedy Space Center for launch, 50% chance of violating conditions, which is also 50% chance of good conditions. The basic concerns are precipitation, cumulus thick clouds, anvil clouds, all related to the threat of lightning. We're also watching the weather downrange in case there is an abort and Dragon has to splash down off the coast. Further, several hundred kilometers away, we are watching a series of weather patterns that look like they're going to be good, so we are continuing into the count right now. Coming up at T-minus 4 hours, the SpaceX launch director will perform a poll. That'll verify the conditions are safe there at the pad to open it back up to just the support crew. That support team will enter the area and begin preparations for arrival of the astronauts at the White Room at about T-minus 3 hours. Following that poll, the launch director will provide a countdown status briefing. We might be able to hear that depending upon what's going on the nets. But right now, as the clock continues counting down, we're going to check in with Gary Jordan. He is with the flight control team at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Mission Control, Houston. How are the teams looking there, Gary?
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone to Mission Control Houston. This room you see behind me is one of 3 flight control rooms at the Johnson Space Center, also known as Flight Control Room 1. This is where teams monitor and direct all of the operations on the International Space Station. It remains staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And today the team is especially focused on monitoring today's launch operations and making final preparations for Bob and Doug to dock with the station tomorrow morning. Today, I'm joined remotely by NASA astronaut Rex Walheim, who was on that last flight from American shores 9 years ago, STS-135, with Doug Hurley. Rex flew on 2 shuttle missions before that and is now the Deputy Director of Safety and Mission Assurance here at the Johnson Space Center. Rex, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure, Gary. Nice to be here.
Now, Rex, we're closing in on the suit-up process for Bob and Doug down at the Cape. What were some of the thoughts going through your head as part of the crew suiting up for a shuttle flight for the very last time?
It's just it's a really exciting time. You've kind of practiced it many times before, but you know this is for real. But again, you never know for sure whether it's going to be for real. So for STS-135, we only had a 30% chance of launching on our actual launch day. So you're thinking, it's probably not going to happen. But you know we got to be ready for game day, and so you get suited up. And you walk out those storied corridors where Neil Armstrong walked out before he went to the moon, and get on the Astrovan in our case and head out to the launch pad.
Rex, as I recall, the weather was not so favorable for STS-135 in the beginning of the day, but started looking a little bit better towards launch time, and you were able to get off the pad, though you had to scrub for weather on 110 and a few times on 122. It seems to be a normal thing for human spaceflight.
Yes, it is. It's like I say, you never know what your launch day is. So you have to be prepared anyways, no matter whether the vehicle may have issues that they're working at the last minute or the weather may not cooperate. So you get ready and do the countdown. And on STS-135, it didn't look very good. Like I said, we had only a 30% chance of go. And so we got out there anyways, and we got strapped in, and we weren't sure whether there was going to be go or not. And our commander looked outside and said, well, I got good news and I got bad news. The bad news, it's raining, but the good news is it looks like it's clearing to the west. And sure enough, they brought the count back down to T-9, where they checked the weather, and they decided it was go. And so, hey, we're going. This is going to be great. Then they brought the countdown all the way down to 31 seconds, and the clock stopped. We didn't get any alarms or anything, and we're kind of looking around, what's going on? And we heard over the intercom that the launch was halted due to a malfunction. And we're like, what kind of malfunction? And sure enough, we figured, okay, well, now we're not going to launch for sure. It's just 31 seconds from launch. We've only got like a minute hold time, and so your mood starts going down. And figured, well, doesn't look like it was going to be it. But turned out the team at the Kennedy Space Center knew what the problem was. They wanted to make sure that the gaseous oxygen hood, the arm, had moved out of the way so the shuttle could launch. They took a camera, verified it was, then they picked up the count. And when they pick up the count from 31 seconds, they think, holy cow, now we really are going. And so it doesn't give you a whole lot of time to collect your thoughts, but all of a sudden, T-minus 6 seconds, the engines start up, and T-minus 0, you feel that big jolt, and hey, it is today, and you get ready to do the mission.
Well, here's to hoping for the best today. NASA astronaut Rex Walheim, thank you for joining us. Let's go back to the Kennedy Space Center to watch the suit up in action as we continue to count down to launch. Leland.
Hey, thanks, Gary. Hey, Rex, it was so great to fly with you on STS-122, and I remember you turning to me saying, hey, Leland, it's going to be great, you're going to do great, and you made me feel so good about launching into space, and I just really appreciate your support and your kindness, and that was a great mission, and I really appreciate you, man.
Hey, it was great fun, Leland, but you're a pretty big guy, and so you didn't exactly leave a lot of space sitting next to you on launch for your buddy here. I kind of had to, kind of scrunch myself to the side. I remember that one sim we had where we put our spacesuits on and got into the simulator, got all strapped in, and you being a former NFL player, having played professional football, like I say, there wasn't a whole lot of room for me, so I kind of squeezed my way the best I could. But I remember saying to our commander, Steve Frick, I said, hey, Steve, next time we fly with a professional athlete, why don't we pick a jockey? So it was a little bit, crowded there, but it was a wonderful flight, and it was an absolute pleasure to fly with you, Leland.
Likewise. And when you came home on 135, I was with your family. I remember it was a night landing, and I said, hey, Fergie's back, and your son, I'll never forget this, he said, hi, Dad, and it's all about the families, and you did such a great job on that mission, flying with Doug on that last shuttle mission. So thank you, Rex, for everything you've done. We're going to go live in crew quarters in a minute and see Bob and Doug suiting up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rex. My takeaway from what Rex had to say is, you're telling me there's a chance. I know there's a chance. There's a pretty good chance, actually, 50% in fact. And the astronaut crew quarters is where astronauts live in seclusion before missions to space, and it's where Bob and Doug have been living for the past 10 days. Now, the suit-up room inside of the crew quarters is something of a national landmark in and of itself. This room was first used as a suit-up room for Apollo 7 back in October 1968. And for every crew mission since then, when launching from U.S. soil, serving 400 different astronauts on a total of 150 missions. This is the room where Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins suited up over 50 years ago, where astronauts John Young and Robert Crippen suited up for the first shuttle flight, STS-1, back in 1981. And for every shuttle flight over the next 30 years, think of that. Every flight to the moon, every flight of Skylab and Apollo flight started in that room. And Leland, I know many of us have experienced some form of quarantine over the last several months, but I would imagine that 2 weeks in quarantine in preparation for a space flight is unlike any other time in your life. What were some traditions that took place?
Oh, we would get together and sit down and sometimes tell jokes and try to make the mood a little bit lighter. We would review our notes and things, but we would bring our families in and have a crew meal together with our families, and that was really touching. And it's just card games, different things to get ready for that iconic mission to space.
Absolutely. In many ways, everything prior to this moment was preparation, and everything after this is the mission. And prior to Wednesday's first attempt that we told you about, the suit-up room was last used for the final shuttle flight, STS-135, in 2011. And I want to mention one more detail about that mission. We want to show you a picture of the crew from the last American space flight launching from U.S. soil. In the picture, if we can bring it up, you'll see Doug Hurley. There it is, Doug Hurley. He was the pilot for STS-135. Today he is the commander of Demo 2, the spacecraft commander. Also suiting up for that mission was Chris Ferguson, Sandy Magnus, and Rex Walheim, who we just heard from a few minutes ago. And we are standing by to go into the suit-up room. We just passed the T-minus 4-hour mark, so suit-up is just beginning now, and there is our first look in the room. There is astronaut Doug Hurley getting into his spacesuit, and he's being helped by one of the suit technicians there. So this is our first look in the room. Again, Doug Hurley, he has flown into space 2 times before. He was the pilot on STS-127 and 135. And there's a wider shot. You can see astronaut Bob Behnken also in view now. Bob is to the right of your screen, and he also flew on 2 shuttle missions. Bob is a native of St. Ann, Missouri. So if you're watching from Missouri, especially St. Ann, wave hi, there's Bob. And Doug is from Appalachian, New York. He was born in Endicott, considers Appalachian his hometown. I know a lot of people there because I'm from there too. So if you're watching from upstate New York, shout out to you there too. This is so cool to see. Leland, this must bring back memories for you.
It does, but it's a little different than when I was suiting up, because there were Apollo era lazy boys that were sitting in and leaning back in, and now they're in these really incredible sleek suits, as well as these the seats that are actually the same seats that are in the Crew Dragon vehicle, and that's pretty amazing.
Yes, these seats are basically ground support equipment seats. They're pretty much the same as the ones in the vehicle, as Leland said. So what they're doing right now is strapping the crew into the seats to prepare for the 2 big checkouts that they're doing right now. They're going to do a comms check, a bidirectional comms check, where they're going to check that the microphones that are inside of the helmets that the crew are wearing, that the suit techs can communicate with them bidirectionally. And they'll also do a leak test, which is a pressure test where they'll pressurize the spacesuit. So the suits are much more than just futuristic looking outfits. They do look like they come from a sci-fi movie, but they, as we described, they're designed to connect directly into Dragon seats to provide communications, cooling, and the ability to pressurize if necessary. A moment ago, you may have seen one of the suit technicians attaching a big white umbilical to the leg of the suit. That is the way in which the communications and the airflow, all of that is happening through that umbilical, which is connected to the seat. So right now, as you can see, the team is getting the crew all buttoned up in their 5-point harnesses and getting ready for those checkouts.
And there's that worm again, Leland, right front and center. How does that make you feel on a spacesuit?
It makes me feel just great, Marie and Lauren. We have a lot of heritage and tradition with the meatball, but I'm able to be a little bit more flexible now. Now that Lauren has beat this worm thing into me. No, but they're getting ready. They're focused. They've had breakfast. They've had chances to talk to friends and family, and it's getting real again. And that 50-50 chance, I'm staying positive on a 50% chance of going. Seeing the suit techs around them with these futuristic-looking flight suits versus the white suits that we've had in the past. It's a transitioning from that old legacy to this new era in space travel. And I think working with NASA and SpaceX, working together as one team, it's just like what we do in space, work together as an international team to get things done.
Absolutely. And this group really gets to know each other well, too. There's a wave from Doug and a thumbs up. That's so cool to see. I mean, the people in that room get to know Bob and Doug really well because they've rehearsed this so many times, especially the suit techs. The suits are, custom made for each of the astronauts. So I feel like I couldn't even count the number of times they've had suit fit checks and leak checks and just making sure every detail with the fit and the function is just perfect before they get ready to launch.
And interestingly enough, these suit techs are also the designers of the spacesuit. They've been working with the crew for years as we've been building these suits, their training suits, all of the training events in Hawthorne, where the crew is inside of the Buck, the capsule simulator. This is the team that's been working with them for years. The team that dressed Ripley, which is the ATD, the dummy that flew in Demo 1.
Mannequin, right?
Mannequin, Smarty.
The
There's
Smarty.
lots of names for Ripley.
But the point being, they've been with these suits from cradle to grave and have been working so closely with Bob and Doug.
Pressures and making sure everything looks good prior to arming the launch escape system, but not tracking a constraint at the moment. So overall, Dragon's healthy and ready for crew ingress.
Okay, thank you for the update, MD. And this concludes the countdown briefing.
So you just heard in that briefing there, they're continuing to move forward towards launch. And as we have a view of Doug Hurley there adjusting his visor, again, he is the spacecraft commander for Demo 2. And while he continues the suit up process, we want to give you a closer look at the veteran Marine Corps fighter pilot and spaceflight pioneer.
Very excited. Yeah, very excited.
Feel ready? Feel pumped?
Oh, yeah, I think we're ready. I think we're certainly ready.
Joining the SpaceX Demo 2 test. He is a Marine Corps colonel and test pilot. He was selected as an astronaut in 2000. He piloted Space Shuttle Endeavour and Atlantis for STS-135, the final space shuttle mission. Introducing NASA astronaut Doug Hurley.
It's a life-changing process in so many ways to fly into space. It's just overwhelming in some respects. Just the sensations, the rumbling, the shaking, the acceleration. When the engines shut off and you go from, in the case of the shuttle, you go from 3 Gs to 0 Gs instantaneously and things start floating. And I remember distinctly just thinking, what just happened? To see a rocket launch in person is, it's a pretty emotional event. I remember the first time I saw a shuttle launch, and it was amazing. And then when I saw a shuttle launch with my wife on it, that is quite the emotional experience. My name is Doug Hurley, and I'm the spacecraft commander for the Demo 2 mission to the International Space Station. We are doing the first crewed flight for NASA and for SpaceX. So this is the test flight to prove end-to-end from launch to docking to ISS operations and then entry, descent, and landing. This will be the first time the Dragon's had a crew on board, and so there's a myriad of objectives we want to achieve for this mission. SpaceX has been responsible for design and essentially making this vehicle what it is. What the astronauts bring to the table is the crew vehicle interface. What would work on orbit, what might not work on orbit, what would definitely work, to be able to just have the entire integrated team that's going to support us getting to and from space station, talking together, working through the challenges that simulators typically throw at you. It was really neat being part of it. It's just been an incredible undertaking to see where we've come just in the last 5 years that Bob and I have been a part of this, and to be, shortly flying to the International Space Station with the Crew Dragon. It overwhelms you to think about how many people have, in some way, shape, or form, touched this program and this vehicle to get us to this point. And we are the lucky ones that get to fly it, but we certainly not for 1 second take for granted the amount of effort that so many other people had to put into this to make it successful.
For Doug personally, he's worked so hard, through his entire life, to get to where we are right now. As a test pilot, this would be a dream to fly a new vehicle. So it makes me so happy to see that he gets to be part of this mission, the spacecraft commander, I'm just glad to see his hard work and his dream has come true for that.
It's been a long road in a lot of ways for not only us, but certainly for all the folks that work in the Commercial Crew Program, as well as SpaceX, in our case, just working to get to this point. It's been a huge amount of sacrifice and time away from home, but the fruits of our labor are coming to fruition.
We are now getting closer to when we expect to see the crew complete their suit checks and walk out of the Neil Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building.
And before they do, here's an introduction to the Joint Operations Commander for Demo 2. You see to the left of your screen there, former Air Force flight test engineer Bob Behnken.
When you go through the launch day preparations, there's a lot of moments that kind of stand out to you. One is the kind of the celebratory piece of it, which is that you're walking out of the suit up room and getting in the vehicle that's going to take you to the launch pad. When you close the hatch, that's really when Doug and I are in the vehicle, and it's our vehicle, and we're really in control of the mission at that point.
Test pilots, their task proved that man could fly into orbit around the Earth and return live and well to talk about it.
There's always a balance of managing risk as you go forward to execute a test point and figuring out a way to collect the data. We hear a sound. Okay, is that sound an expected sound? Or we see a light, is that light an expected light? What's the source of it? Does it sync up with something else that's going on or not? So trying to dissect all of that in real time in your head is, a lot of things happen like that on launching of a vehicle.
From St. Anne, Missouri, he is an Air Force colonel and flight test engineer. He flew aboard Space Shuttle Endeavour twice. Introducing NASA astronaut Bob Behnken.
My career at NASA has kind of spanned a couple of decades at this point. I arrived with the class of 2000, went through the training program, primarily focused on the Space Shuttle and the International Space Station, learning those systems. Having launched a couple times on vehicles, the second time was definitely different than the first time. You can feel a little bit guilty of, hey, should I study one more thing? Or is there one more piece of information I should get? Am I really prepared or not? So that's definitely different between where I was on my first flight and where I'm at right now. It's been really interesting, I think, for both my wife and I to have gone through the process of seeing each other launch in space. I've seen her take that risk and had it be in front of her, and I've done that to her. And there's just something different about watching a rocket launch when there are people on board. You feel a little bit differently about the pit of your stomach, and I can only tell you it's multiplied significantly when it's somebody that you know, and then somebody, of course, that's a family member. It's even multiplied more.
For me personally, as a spouse, watching everything that Bob has put into this over the last 5 years, the dedication that he's shown, the perseverance is pretty special. For both of us, though, the way our minds work, it won't be until sort of the mission is complete that you have really a chance to savor it and celebrate it. This is a huge accomplishment for an Air Force flight test engineer to be part of the demonstration mission of a brand new vehicle. It's going to be amazing.
Without a partner that has that same appreciation, I think it can be challenging for some folks. There's a lot of work and a lot of time that takes away from family that that my spouse appreciates, and I love her for that. Really, my role on the Demo 2 mission is to make sure that we get this vehicle tested and evaluated so that we can move on to more operational missions at the International Space Station. We've got a lot of objectives on board the vehicle that we need to accomplish to really make sure that it's good to go. We'll make sure all those systems are working during the test flight so that the future missions will have them available even if they don't plan to utilize them. Through years of the NASA team helping to share that experience and teaching them the lessons that we've learned by going through this, now there's another capability in the U.S. besides NASA to operate something of this magnitude. When is the last time humans launched on a new vehicle? Certainly on the American side, it's been several decades. Now we're in a time when we've got multiple vehicles under development. It's a great time from a space exploration time frame just to see all that happening, and it's because of this nurturing of the environment, being able to pull in a wider group of people who can contribute towards human spaceflight. It's a super cool time. On a deeply personal level, I'm really excited that my son is going to get a chance to see me launch into space. Being an astronaut has been a little bit of an abstraction thing for him because he's seen me do it in old videos, but he hasn't seen me do it for real. And so I'm excited for him to see this launch. I want to thank the entire Commercial Crew Program team that's worked together to get to this point where we've got vehicles in the launch pad ready to head to the International Space Station.
And here is a live look again inside the suit-up room in the Neil Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building. We can see now NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine. He's talking to the crew. You won't hear any audio in here. And actually, we had some questions about this Wednesday because people were like, why can't I hear what they're saying? That's by design. It's not a mistake. We are really lucky to be able to show you this video live as they're suiting up, but you don't hear the audio because that's a little bit, we try to give the crew a little bit of privacy. And so being able to talk freely and share really what's on their minds without having to worry about who's listening is part of the reason you don't hear audio in there. But that's Jim Bridenstine there talking to the crew, and it looks like Associate Administrator Jim Morhard is also in the room standing to the right of your screen.
And these are great moments to get a last chance to talk to the senior leadership of NASA as they're about to go off and launch into the cosmos. And I think when you look at how Bob and Doug complement each other and how these SpaceX suits, they really complement the astronauts too, because they're more form-fitted, they're custom-made, and this is a moment where they're getting ready to, do the real deal. And Lauren, I think, the integration of the suit and the vehicle and these seats is just really, really impressive how y'all at SpaceX did that.
Yeah, the primary purpose of the spacesuit, it's a pressure suit. Now, the Dragon capsule is already pressurized, so even in the vacuum of space, the crew is safe when inside of Dragon. But in the unlikely event of an anomaly that causes the capsule to depressurize, we can actually flow oxygen or nitrox into the suit, and that will keep the astronauts pressurized in flight. So that's its main purpose. So it's that form and function and some style there as well.
And for the kids out there that have 3D printers or have 3D printed, the actual helmets were made by 3D printing. So you could be a spacesuit designer yourself because you already have the skill set, and or fly in space one day if you wanted to.
And I'm curious about what kind of conversation might be going on with them. Looks like it's lighthearted. You can see Doug laughing there. I know that Mr. Bridenstine has said, Bob and Doug, if you want to back out, it's not too late. I would imagine he may have said that again. I know they're ready to go. They're as eager as can be. And it looks like they may have another visitor coming in. Oh, no, it looks like the administrator's just being passed something there. But
and it's really important. I mean, we've trained for so long. We've gone through the malfunction processes. Now he's doing a selfie.
Of course, you got to do the selfie. I didn't see them do this on Wednesday, so they were probably kicking themselves when they walked out. Why didn't we do a selfie in there?
I wonder if he has that Instagram filter to put the glasses on. Do you think he has it on?
Well, you can tweet at him and find out.
Yeah, I might have to do that. This is a great lighthearted moment. It helps gets the guys in a good mindset to go off in space in a very calm and cool and collected way. I think he's now taking pictures of some of the crew techs, the suit techs, which is fantastic. It's all about bringing the family and the team together, making everyone feel comfortable on flight day and helping us get to space safely, as we always try to do.
And obviously this is a very serious mission. I mean, we don't want to make too much light of it, but Leland, you mentioned Wednesday, and I thought that was a really good point, why it's important to be able to joke around and keep things light as you're getting ready to go to the launch pad.
Yeah, when I went up on 122 with Rex and we just talked to Rex, we were, in the caravan going over to the launch pad, we were kind of making some jokes, but as we were suiting up, we would look over each other, we would get up and high five and we'd say, hey, you're ready? Let's go, let's do this, and it's just, you've already trained. You know how to do this. You've done it many, many times. And so I think it's that lightheartedness is good. But, you know, right when you get in the vehicle, the 3, 2, 1 liftoff, that's when you're ready to go.
And they're the visitors making their way out of the room. And as we mentioned, Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, I mean, they are two of the finest at what they do. And it's really starting to sink in that the mission is on as you see them in their spacesuits.
And seeing them in these suits has always been so inspiring to me from the first time that I saw them in Hawthorne at SpaceX headquarters during training. It's kind of like a sci-fi film, but unlike a movie prop, which primarily just needs to look cool, our team designed the suit to maximize safety and functionality while maintaining style. Here are two members of our spacesuits team, Chris Trigg and Maria Sundin, telling us about how the suit came to be.
I think one of the things that was important in the development of the suit was to make it easy to use, something that the crew just has to literally plug in when they sit down, and then the suit kind of takes care of itself from there. So the suit is really kind of one part of the bigger Dragon system. It's really part of the vehicle. So we think of it as kind of a suit-seat system. So the seat that the crew is in and the suit are in a lot of ways working together. And so it made sense that we were designing Dragon in-house to also design the suit.
Our spacesuits is completely designed in-house. It's built here in Hawthorne, California, in the same building as the rocket and the capsule. The spacesuit is custom-made for each crew member, and that is to optimize the fit for the crew member.
We definitely wanted to innovate, and we wanted it to look inspiring, but first and foremost, we wanted it to be safe and reliable. The spacesuit's primary purpose is to protect the crew in the unlikely event that the cabin were to depressurize. But the suit does a number of additional things. It provides cooling and communication to the crew inside of the suit, provides them the valves that are regulating pressure in the suit, work with the touchscreens. But the gloves also still had to do a number of other things like the rest of the suit. So all of those things had to come together within the glove. It'll be obviously really amazing to see Bob and Doug in their flight suits. And I think one of the things that's cool about the suit is it's not just a piece of hardware. It's not just a suit. It's a very personal thing. It's Bob's suit and it's Doug's suit. And so seeing the two of them in their suits, using it in flight will be just a really amazing thing.
And you're looking live at Launch Complex 39A. That is Crew Dragon in the center of your screen, sitting atop a 2-stage Falcon 9 SpaceX rocket that will produce 1.7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. We are keeping our fingers crossed that the weather cooperates. It's a 50-50 chance. It looks beautiful right now, but there may be some thunderstorms rolling in later, so we're keeping a close eye on the weather. In the meantime, we're going to head west to Hawthorne for an operational update. Dan?
Hey, Marie. We are here in Hawthorne still. The astronauts have a crew training facility that's equipped with both a cockpit simulator and a full-scale Dragon mock-up to conduct simulations both for nominal and off-nominal situations.
And recently, the SpaceX team shared the exact same ISS simulator that the astronauts train on with the public, so you can try your hand at docking the ISS. If you head over to iss-sim.spacex.com, you can try your hand at docking with the space station. And I've tried it once before. It was really difficult. It looks way more, it's more difficult than it actually is, I think.
Yeah, flying in space is really deceiving. Just when you think you're going really slow and everything's okay, the next thing you know, you're careening into the space station. So it's way harder. You have to go way slower than you think.
Pressurized to final flight pressure about an hour ago. We had the support team arrive in the White Room just inside T-minus 4 hours. And we're waiting right now for the crew to walk out of the ONC building, and they should arrive at the pad by about T-minus 3 hours. For the Dragon spacecraft, all systems are also currently go. The Air Force range reports no issues at this time. The range will be maintaining both air and sea space clearance around the launch pad. They also help support things like putting the roadblocks up to prevent access to the hazard areas at both the launch site at 39A and around the Cape. Now, the big question, of course, is the weather. And as I said before, we all talk about it, but it's the one thing we can't do anything about. Weather is 50% probability of good conditions. We are going to be watching for the clouds, lightning, thunderstorms, The sea breeze is not as strong today, and that's going to not help push all of that back over central Florida. But right now, things are looking good with both Falcon 9 and Dragon as we count down to liftoff. Now, we want to see where you're following today's launch from, so we're going to jump over to Tahira at our social desk.
Thanks, John. So glad to hear that things are at least looking good right now for this launch. Really hope it stays that way. So we just took a look at numbers of viewerships across our social media platforms, and there are now 500,000 of you tuning in for today's broadcast. Welcome, guys. We are so excited to have you. We also have the top cities right now tuning in, and that's Columbia, South Carolina, Houston, Texas, Los Angeles, New York, and Orlando. So it seems like the East Coast is really pulling today's viewership, but hey, last time on Wednesday, California came in and really stole the whole show away. Let's take a look at what's being shared online right now. So right now we have this future astronaut, and I don't know who. Absolutely love it. Let's take a second look. Okay, right now we have a French bulldog. It looks like taking Bob's place for launch right now. This is so funny. We love to see it, guys. And so for those of you tuning in, be sure to use that hashtag LaunchAmerica on social media and show us how you're getting ready for liftoff. So earlier in the show, we polled users to see which NASA logo you're sporting for today's launch, and the results are in. So it looks like about 62% of you are wearing the meatball today, and that leaves the worm falling a little bit behind. But hey, now that the worm is back, maybe y'all will be sporting it more often. And so with that, let's head back to Marie at NASA Kennedy. Marie?
Thanks, Tahira. We have some really spirited reactions.
Meatball and the Worm, or a card game that we play called Possum's Fargo. And you have to play enough hands to where the commander loses a hand before we can walk out. So that's probably going on right now. They're getting ready to have Doug lose his hand.
Yes.
And then we can get in the elevator and come out and get in the spaceship.
Yep, so we're giving them that moment.
Then we can get in the elevator and come out and get in the spaceship.
Yep, so we're giving them that moment in private. And Leland, I wanted to ask you too, because we had a scrub really late in the count yesterday. We got just under T-minus 17 minutes, and we were all like, oh, it was like a collective groan across the country, everybody watching. And I know you've been through a delay once yourself on one of your shuttle flights. And I wonder, what does it take to kind of refocus yourself on day two? I mean, do you go through all the exact same preparations? Do you do anything a little different? Is there a little bit of superstition involved?
No, not really. I mean, we try to keep everything the same way because we've practiced this way, and now we're in the real day. We're playing this way. So if you stay the same, kind of the same form and function that you've done before, nothing else hopefully will happen that's out of character to your mission. So I think we just try to stay the same way.
Yeah, that's good insight. And I know, Bob and Doug, we heard them on the comms after that as they were detanking Falcon 9, and we're waiting for them to get out of Crew Dragon, and they were just cool, calm, collected, thanking the teams for doing a good job. Nobody's getting launch fever, and they're going to do the same thing today. No matter how many people are watching, they're going to make the same call as they would if nobody was paying any attention.
Right, and I was talking to CJ Sturkow before I launched on my first mission, and he said that he made a mistake and flipped the wrong switch on Ascent, and he glommed on that and was about to make another mistake. But he said that he had to just focus and get back to, grace under pressure so that he would make a third mistake, which could have been, catastrophic. So that's what we always try to do, is to try to do everything the same way, be very deliberate, but be very graceful, not really try to overthink something, but try to stay safe.
Absolutely.
And calm.
Yeah, that's so key, and I know that's top of mind for all the SpaceX and NASA teams working on this today. And again, we're just standing by. We expect the crew is going to be leaving the suit up room in just a couple of minutes, so we're giving them those last few minutes in private at the ONC building. And again, we're looking at the pad here. One of the other things that struck me, you know, we watched the videos about Bob and Doug, and when I went home on Wednesday, you know, because people saw a lot of people who were watching and then or maybe like just super pumped about seeing this, and the airmen that are watching Bob, seeing them represent the Air Force. I mean, it's just such a cool moment for our military community, and as a military spouse, I definitely feel some of that pride.
I saw Charlie Bolin last night coming from the restaurant, and he was very excited about Doug as a Marine, and he's a Marine, and so Semper Fi. It was definitely something he said, Godspeed Semper Fi, go Crew Dragon. So it's our military people that are helping us with this launch, with the recovery, with all these other things is very important to the success of the mission.
Absolutely. And we want to turn our attention back to the Neil Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building. If we could, we want to take you to a picture of the doors. There they are. Those, and it's an area towards launch for the first two commercial crew astronauts. These doors carry with them a legacy of purpose and action, and today they will announce to all of us the start of this, NASA's SpaceX Demo 2 mission.
And you saw just a little bit of my walkout from STS-129, my last mission, and I remember having my friends and family out there. There was my chemistry teacher that was in the crowd. She got me turned on to science and helped me actually become an astronaut. And I just remember her being in the crowd saying, "Go Leland!" And it was just such a memorable moment for me. It kind of got more rocket fuel in my veins, getting me ready for my mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were just looking at a live picture outside of the building where we could see some of the folks gathered. We could see a small contingent of media there. I mean, normally that place would be just
was so gallant. The rockets rock alive, the bombs bursting in. I gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Oh, I got goosebumps listening to that. I mean, it doesn't get old. We heard it Wednesday, but I mean, I could hear that every day of the week.
She was blowing.
Yeah, amazing. Behnken and Doug Hurley to walk out of the Neil Armstrong Operations and Checkout building any minute now. So we're going to be ready to cut to that shot just as soon as we get the word that they're ready to walk out that door. Those doors, excuse me. Again, looking like it's been a beautiful start to the day here on Cape Canaveral, but we're keeping a close eye on weather because it looks a little iffy as we get later into the afternoon, closer to launch time, which again is 3:22 this afternoon.
What always blows me away every time I visit Florida is, 1 hour it's this beautiful, clear, gorgeous day, and then an hour later it's a thunderstorm.
You said it. Welcome to our world.
And then an hour later, it's back to clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just similarly to last attempt, right? I mean, just 15, 20 minutes later, it was good to go.
I know, it hurt my soul because we have this instantaneous launch window. It's not like with shuttle where we could give it a couple more minutes because you had a 10-minute window. We have a single second to get this off the ground. So everything's got to be just right. The conditions all have to be green at